It has been another great tomato year here in the garden, and so I'm going to walk you through each variety, talk about which ones have grown best, which ones I likely won't plant again, which ones taste best, and all the things you need to know to grow great tomatoes. So let's check out all the varieties growing this year. Alrighty, so the first tomato that we have right here is the sungold cherry tomato. It is one of my favorites. It is super sweet. One plant will give you thousands of cherry tomatoes, and so if you want a good cherry tomato, this is definitely one worth growing. It is a hybrid. It produces like crazy. It thrives in the heat. The only downside I would say to the sungold cherry tomato is that if you leave the cherry tomatoes on the plant too long, they will start to split. And so as soon as you see them ripe, it is worth picking them, but a little slit doesn't cause any harm. But that is one downfall. Next up here, we have the Juliet tomato. It is another one of my favorites. As far as flavor goes, it's not the sweetest, but what I love about it is that there's hardly any juice or seeds, and so it's great to chop up on a salad. It's great if you're going to add it into some salsa or make bruschetta. However, for just plain eating, it's not the best, but it is so prolific in the case, or in the sense that it grows like crazy. I have just one plant. It goes up and over the arch every year. And it's really great because it grows in these little clusters that are really easy to harvest. So you can see right here, we have these little, they're smaller than a Roma tomato, but larger than a cherry tomato or a grape tomato. So here it is. But they're just in these little clusters that are super easy to harvest. And like I said, they go great in a salad. They actually hold up really well on the plant too. They don't get smushy. So even if you leave them on the plant for longer than they should be, even once they reach maturity, they hold up really well on the plant. I will say too, we often can these along with our other tomatoes that we can. We blanch them to remove the skin, and then you can just cut a little slit in the tomato and the pulp just slides right out. And it's great for canning because there's very little juice, very little seeds, and so it makes a great tomato to add to your sauce or to just can chopped up or whole. And now right behind me, we have the Crimson Carmello. This was a new variety that I planted for the first time this year. It is bred in France. It's known for being great for fresh eating. It is supposed to be very disease resistant. However, I will say it is the only tomato plant this year that has a little bit of disease. So I may or may not plant it going forward. I only planted one plant, and it is the only plant out of all of the tomato plants I have this year that actually has a little bit of disease on the leaves this year. So we'll see. As far as flavor goes, it tastes good. It's nothing special. I don't think I like it any better than my favorite, which is an early girl and a better boy, but it tastes good. And one thing I do like is it's a pretty good sized tomato. It doesn't have very much juice or seeds, so it was actually great for canning. I noticed that when we were canning tomatoes the other day. It was a great tomato that was just pretty much all pulp. So a really great meaty tomato that was great to add to the sauce. One thing I will say is that the amount of tomatoes on this plant compared to a few others is not as great. There's not that many tomatoes actually on this plant. So I give it a C. Alrighty, and now we have the winner, which is the early girl. The early girl by far grows the best for me season after season. The tomatoes themselves are actually really good in size. So I know it's hard to judge, in a video, but these are both early girl tomatoes, really good in size. This one is basically the palm of my hand. And the thing I love about the early girl is that it just produces so well in our hot summers. It is a hybrid, but I will say a fresh early girl right off the vine tastes incredible. I will get to an heirloom later on in this video that I believe actually has the best flavor of all of my tomatoes, but it's not the winner as far as growth goes because I got very few tomatoes from the plant. It doesn't hold up as well, and to me, I would just rather get lots of tomatoes versus just a few really great tasting ones. Just this one plant behind me, and just my plain view as I did a quick count, there are 40 ripe tomatoes to pick right now. And this is towards the end of the season. We've already gotten so many tomatoes off of these plants. Next up here, we have the Better Boy. And I will say Better Boy and Early Girl are always go hand in hand. I love them both. I will always grow both. The Early Girl this year seems to be producing more tomatoes, but the Better Boy is holding up pretty much just as well. As far as size goes, so they're pretty darn equal. This is the Better Boy. It is slightly bigger than the Early Girl, but I know a lot of people really love to grow large tomatoes, your big heirlooms or beefsteak. However, sometimes I have a hard time growing those here in our hot summers, and I find that the Better Boy and the Early Girl can get almost just as big and they hold up better. They don't tend to split, and they just produce like crazy. And now for my favorite canning tomato, which is a San Marzano. So San Marzano is a paste tomato, meaning that it's really meaty. It's great for canning. There's not as much juice and seeds, which makes it ideal for canning or making sauce. It also tastes incredible. I love it fresh with bruschetta, but I pretty much just tend to add my tomatoes to everything. But I try to save most of the San Marzanos for our canning days. It grows really well. We have grown them successfully last year and this year. There have been years in the past when they didn't grow quite as well. However, I always grow them because if I get a good crop, they're my most favorite to can. Alrighty, and now we've made it to the Romas, and you can likely see quite a significant difference. These are a lot shorter, they're more compact. So a Roma is a determinate type of tomato, meaning that it grows to a determined height. It usually sets all of its fruit at once so that you get one large harvest, and it doesn't keep growing up and over the trellis like those other tomatoes that we just saw. However, this specific Roma that I planted this year, I'm not that fond of. So I planted, I believe, a Grande Roma or a Rio Grande. I started my own seedlings, and I, of course, threw the packet of seeds away, and I didn't actually write it down. So shame on me. So that is one reason why you should keep notes. But this Roma is supposed to be larger in size than a typical Roma. And what I have found is that this Roma is larger, but it has a huge core. And so you don't want to chop it up because it's really tough. And so I have to cut that core out. So as far as like the flesh of the tomato goes, you're really not getting much more tomato. So I would grow just regular old Romas. I know there's lots of different types of Romas out there, but this Grande Roma that I'm growing, I will not grow again just because it has a really large core. And now for my favorite tasting tomato of the season, which is this Heirloom right here. And unfortunately, I cannot give you the exact variety name because I planted an Heirloom mix. So it was actually a packet of seeds that I think just came as a bonus packet of seeds in a collection that I bought a few years back. And it just says Rainbow Heirloom variety pack. It doesn't tell you which varieties are inside the pack. So I just planted a few, and I have 3 different plants growing. And of course, this is the best tasting tomato of the season, but I don't know the exact variety. So I'm saving my own seeds. I'm going to plant them again next year. And I'm sure that I can pinpoint what the variety is. I'm going to do a little bit of research, but there's quite a few heirlooms that look very similar. So I'm not for sure on this variety. However, it does taste incredible. It's a huge, large heirloom, incredible flavor. One thing I will say is that this one plant only has about 10 tomatoes on the entire plant. And I know earlier I mentioned how that early girl plant had 40 ripe tomatoes just in sight as I was filming this video. So that's a huge difference. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't grow heirlooms, but they tend to not be as productive as your hybrids. One of the downsides to this plant is that if you don't pick the fruit as soon as it's ripe, it does shrivel up really fast. So it does not hold up on the plant well. And that's one of the things I love about the hybrids is that even once they are ripe, you can leave them on the plant and they hold up pretty well. That might not be the case with every hybrid. However, the ones that I'm personally growing, that is the case. But with this heirloom right here, it got ripe and I noticed it was approaching, that perfect ripeness, but I wanted to give it just a day or two more. And then by the time I got out to the garden to harvest, it was already shriveled up like this. So that is one downside I will say. However, the flavor is incredible. And then lastly, we have one more heirloom mystery tomato from that variety pack. Same thing, I don't know the variety. It's a really small heirloom, basically like a large cherry tomato. The flavor is good. It's nothing that special. It's great for salads, but I don't personally like to grow lots of really small tomatoes because they're more time consuming to pick. And when it comes to canning and things like that, they're just a little bit more difficult to deal with. But the flavor is good, but I'm kind of unsure if I'm going to save the seeds or not and plant it again next year. It does have quite a few tomatoes, so maybe we'll give it one more shot. But as far as flavor goes, it's just fine. So I hope walking through all the tomatoes gave you a little bit of inspiration on what varieties to try. If you've struggled with your tomatoes in the past, I would definitely recommend trying out a few of these favorites, especially the Early Girl, the Better Boy, and the Sungold. And then, of course, we have the Mystery Heirloom that tastes incredible. However, as far as production goes, it's not the best, but it does have great flavor. And I just wanted to let you know that I have a free tomato growing guide that you can get for free. It's going to be linked below this video, but it's going to give all of my best tips to grow great tomatoes and mistakes to avoid. So be sure to grab that below. But if you want to jump in right now and start learning, go ahead and head to this video right here. I talk about some of my best tips for growing tomatoes. So head to that video next and I'll see you there.